Hello and welcome to the Poor Hammer Podcast, episode 76. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
My head hurts so bad at this point, I can't read the episode number. So let's get started.
Sounds good.
Alright, a quick bit of news before we actually get into the topic. The day this episode releases on YouTube, we will have a YouTube community post on our channel that you can go to and submit questions for next week's episode, where we will be dragging our editor on at gunpoint to talk about any Q&A stuff you guys have for us about us, the podcast, our opinions on Warhammer stuff, the YouTube channel in general, and making videos, whatever. If you can think of it and it's funny to you, or you are entertained by the idea of us answering it, feel free to ask it. I will then completely ignore you and answer questions that I like.
You could also provide answers and we'll give you the question.
Ooh, that's a spicy one too. All right, with that out of the way, I would just like to thank you all so much, and we can get into the topic proper now, for real this time.
It's about damn time.
Stop pretending StarCraft is cool. It's a piece of shit game.
Oh, fuck you.
Speaking of piece of shit games, it just starts off. Alright, so we're admitting we're washed up this week. We've got no more content, no more ideas. We're doing a rerun episode.
Yay! Everybody loves rerun episodes.
So back in February of 2022, 18 months ago, we released episode 14 of this podcast in audio-only format.
Pre-YouTube days.
So our opinions have changed. A couple new armies exist that didn't at the time, so it's time to revisit the subject of that episode that I'm sure you're all very aware of and not annoyed I haven't mentioned yet. That is...
to continue to derail it a little bit further, there's also armies that have left.
Ooh, that's a good point. Wow, low blow. Alright, so the episode topic itself was which armies are the easiest to paint. So let's begin by breaking down the tiers we can put every one of these factions into. So going from the bottom to the top, we're starting out at the bottom.
Alright.
These are going to be factions that we label as not even at gunpoint. This is for the worst of the worst, the things you absolutely at no point want to be stuck painting.
Yeah, for general reasons of it's just miserable.
For one reason or another, but we'll get into it when we're talking about each faction.
Yeah. From there, it goes up to the exciting, the Chaos Trim Zone.
Which, it's what it says on the tin.
Well, and the opposite, but yes, we'll get to that.
The one up from that is called Airbrush Check, which is a very important tier based off the last time we attempted this episode.
You got your airbrush ready? From there, we go to the B tier.
It's a complicated one, but we'll get to it later. Then we go up to Painless, which is a tier for armies that are actually not terrible to paint. They're just downright fine.
You get some good enjoyment out of it. And then we go to the Paintbrush Liquor Approved tier, the epitome of this tier list. Where do we start? Do we start at the bottom and work our way up, or do we just randomly choose armies and put them somewhere?
Randomly choose armies to keep people guessing the entire way through.
Brilliant.
I'm randomly choosing Genestealer Cults, who are going into not even at gunpoint because they are, without a doubt, the absolute worst faction to paint. Nothing comes close. If you are attempting to paint to a good standard, I'm not going to say like Parade Ready Standard or Golden Demon or anything like that, but you're trying to get your army on the table and not feel embarrassed when people look at it. Genestealers is the hardest to get this done with.
And I think that's the assumption that we're going to use for all of these is like get it ready and not embarrassing, but not like insane. Yeah, Genestealers is brutal.
And we're not going to look at these from this army is really easy, but this one model is a living nightmare, so it should go down a tier. We're going to ignore that fact. And we're not going to look at these from this army sucks to paint, but here is a single speed painting method that makes the army okay if you're okay with this specific paint job.
Yeah, these are general feedback kind of things.
Your typical paint job.
And it comes down to the fact that this is like a hobby. So if you want it to be complicated, you can make the painless ones complicated.
Yeah, this is for your typical average Joe paint job.
Yeah, this is kind of just like a general expectation for the army, but caveats and all of that aside, Genestealers are fucked.
The average Genestealer list runs between 60 and 100 troops, and those troops, if you pick up a Neophyte hybrid and look at the details on that model, even if you like try to keep, okay, his pants will be one color, we'll only color in the shin pads, and then we'll do the armor and the Saiyan armor booby plates separate.
That's a lot for that many models.
They all have exposed skin everywhere, complicated ragtag guns.
Yeah, so you can't just like give it a base coat, a couple highlight things, and then wash it, essentially. Like, no.
It's a slog, and I have not painted a single Genestealer yet. I've looked at them, but I haven't touched mine.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I don't know a single person who would defend Genestealers going higher, but yeah, not even at gunpoint.
Which is entertaining because within the next year or so you're going to start that project. So
it's okay because I made that the project. It's not me trying to rush done my army. It is me picking up an army to be a giant project.
And you're a masochist. But moving on.
Let's talk about the new guys, World Eaters. That way we're not predictable this time.
Ooh, nice.
World Eaters are going in the Chaos Trim Zone.
Yeah.
Hint, they won't be alone here. You can probably figure it out. I trust our audience with a base level of intelligence on what's going to end up in the Chaos Trim Zone.
Yeah, it's almost like a lot of Chaos models have very similar theming, and that makes them annoying.
World Eaters aren't hyper elite by any means to save them from this fate. They're pretty standard Space Marine level amount of painting required. They aren't like a big vehicle faction or anything to make them go anywhere else. They're just a pretty bog standard. Lots of infantry filled with lots of trim work.
It's not the worst trim work, but it's also not going to be particularly enjoyable. But hopefully we'll see more from this faction in the future, and maybe it changes. But
okay, we're done surprising people by talking about something new, so we're not going in the exact order we did last time. What do you want to do next, Eric? Who would you like to talk about?
Tau.
Tau? Are we literally just going to go up this? Okay, I see what you're doing.
Damn it, he figured it out already.
Tau, the last time we did this episode, we talked about it at length. Tau live in a superposition between not even at gunpoint and painless. They float between these two states depending on whether or not you own an airbrush. Thus, our invention of the airbrush check.
Because one of the most annoying things with Tau is to make the brush marks disappear.
Yes, if you have a bunch of giant flat panels, especially with notorious paint colors, if you're trying to do box art colored Tau.
Oh god, white.
That would not be fun to try painting by hand.
Especially if you're using GW white.
Don't do that to yourself. You're worth more than that.
Yeah. We'll give GW shit for some things that they might not deserve their whites. On the other hand, they deserve all the shit they get for that. But if you have an airbrush, all of those brush mark problems go away.
Yeah, honestly, Tau is very reliant on whether or not you have an airbrush. And we're going to be doing a whole episode quite soon as our first foray into talking about hobbying. And it's about a certain topic that might be relevant to what we're saying right now.
Maybe. But yeah, if you've got an airbrush, Tau are going to be pretty fun to actually paint up. If you don't, it's going to be pretty miserable. Moving on from there, let's do Space Marines.
No.
Damn
it. Stop it.
Fine. What do you want to do next?
Let's talk about orcs.
Okay.
Where do you want to put orcs, Eric? What is your take?
Well, orcs are fascinating because there's so much customization and so much that the army tries to like force you to do customization and force you to embrace the nonsense. It's really kind of painless just because it's fun.
That's basically where I assumed they were going. I just wanted to make sure that's your opinion on it.
The thing is like the default generic you can do pretty easily. Orc skin's not that difficult.
A Plague Bearer flesh contrast over just a Zenithal skin will instantly get you GW's orc skin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of that green. I like it a little bit different, but
there's a new one in the new contrast you could use.
Yes.
That's very similar. But I love that pale, almost to yellow green.
Yes.
That they've got, where it's not that like comedy cartoon orc green. It doesn't look like Shrek.
I like the Shrek look.
It's awful.
I embrace it. But either way, it is reasonably easy to get to that point. paint. That said, because Orks as a faction is a hobby faction, kind of push you to do kit bashing, push you to do interesting, unique takes on it. You can go as deep and as complicated as you want. And I think that's why it stays in the painless tier, because you get to choose how complicated you want it to be.
Yes.
It could be super easy. It could be fucking difficult as hell, but you've made the choice. So long as you know ahead of time, like, yeah, I'm making this complicated, I want to do that, then it's going to be painless because that's the choice you made. That's why you're doing it.
I'd go a step further and say they also have the safety net. Orcs that are painted badly is just kind of funny.
Yeah, that's true. It very much is orky. It's super easy to do battle damage. I didn't fuck that paint up. Not at all. That was intended.
An orc painted that. Have you seen an orc paint?
That is very true. It does have a fantastic safety net.
All right, to get another one of these out of the way, Death Guard. I think Death Guard originally we put as like an A tier because of the trope of Death Guard can just be dunked in Agrax Earthshade or, a custom brown wash.
Yeah, right.
Our local Death Guard player had words with me after that episode went live. He told me to shut my mouth. I don't know how miserable painting Death Guard can be. Every single model, as he proved, as he put them on the table and forced me to pick them up and look at them, every single Plague Marine sculpt is entirely unique and has all sorts of things that are only on that sculpt that you have to figure out how to paint.
Yeah.
It's bad if you want it to look good. It has a higher floor than a lot of other stuff.
It's not even that you want it to look good. You just want it to look non-embarrassing.
Exactly. You don't want to feel bad about it. And it's a lot harder to raise. I get it. And they still have all the trim work of CSM or World Eaters. They're not rubric level bad, but they're down there. I get it.
They've got a decent amount of bits that you gotta deal with.
It's definitely one of our revisions from our last take at this.
Yeah, there were words had and acceptable. Let's go to one of the knights. Which knight do you want to do first? Or do you want to put them together? I feel like they're separate.
We'll talk about them each alone. And I want to talk about the baseline with Imperial Knights first. And I don't know where they're going.
Airbrush check.
Okay. We need to have a serious talk. I'm not going to put them anywhere yet. Let's talk with them off the table. Knights are a faction that you pick up to hobby.
That's true.
Knights literally exist as a way to tempt you to do a project. They are a big, chunky boy, and they are a treat to paint. Downright fun at times. There are 100 ways to approach a knight. You don't need an airbrush at all because, to be honest, dry brushing all of their metal parts and then actually just being careful on the panels isn't that bad. They're not like Tau where they're made of a bunch of straight panels.
That's true. And they're large enough that, like, you can get some fun.
That's something for people who haven't painted an army yet. The larger the model, the easier it is to paint, which sounds counterintuitive. The smaller something is, the harder it is to get it right.
There's less room for error.
Yes. If you're not trying to do something crazy, like some Richard Gray freehand stuff, then Knights is very easy to get to a good looking standard. However, I agree, I think Imperial Knights is more of an airbrush check than Chaos Knights is. Imperial Knights does have larger flat panels that are uninterrupted. They are big flat surfaces, well, big rounded surfaces. They're very, very much like painting a vehicle in other armies.
That's true. I mean, I agree with you that they are like the centerpiece model kind of thing that you've picked up for making it like your model kind of thing. It's like a display piece essentially.
And it might be the thing that is your argument for, fine, I'll finally invest in the airbrush that Brad keeps telling me I need to buy. Oh wow, it was such a good idea, like he told me I would say.
So I could see Knights going in painless just because it'll be one of those like you've got the time for it kind of thing.
And that's where I'm going to put Chaos Knights.
Okay.
We could argue back and forth on which one they they go in. But the key difference, having both of them on hand, Imperial Knights have a lot more big flat panels. Chaos Knights love having battle damage on every panel. They love breaking it up with, like spikes coming out of the middle to screw up the big flat surface. It can actually be kind of hard to find places to put a big freehand thing. Not that I have any interest in doing that on mine, but it would be difficult if that was a thing I was going to care about.
But at the same time, like, a lot of the trim is not super small and delicate, so it's not like the fiddly bits.
Look, I went from finishing my Thousand Suns to the very next model I touched was a knight. It was night and day, no pun intended. It was night and day, the difference of what the worst trim in Chaos and what a Chaos Knight have for trim.
That trim almost fucking broke you.
Yeah, whereas Chaos Knight trim is a joke. It's just a different panel.
Which is cool. It's still a large canvas, so you get to have your fun.
Yes, and it's not like doing Chaos trim.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that because they don't have as large flat surfaces, it is easier to hide the issues that you would have without an airbrush. Airbrushes would still be fantastic for getting sweet gradients and blends on what there is. That's what I did, but it's a lot easier to brush those than it is for brushing the big curved flat shoulders of an Imperial Knight.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those that, like, at a certain point, every army can get benefit from an airbrush, but there are some that are like, if you have an airbrush, this is a substantial different feeling than if you don't. Yeah, I could see Chaos Knights being okay without it. So, moving on.
All right, Eric, now you can ask for it.
Spacemen.
Space Marines are the reason we have B tier.
It's true. I hate that it's true, but it is.
We originally made this where everything was its own fancy name because people said we were too boring by using normal letters.
Yeah, I think the last time we did this, it was just like S, A, B, C, and whatever.
Yeah, so we invented B tier because Space Marines certainly aren't painless. Ask anyone who paints them.
There's actually a decent amount of work that needs to be done.
And airbrushes make everything easier, but they are not an airbrush required faction by any means.
Definitely not. Unless you're just painting a shitload of rhinos, then...
Sure.
I mean, at that point, just go to your hardware store and get a spray paint can and call it good.
Yeah, so they're why B tier exists. They are your baseline we're judging things off of for this for the most part.
It's not that they're difficult or anything. It's just there's going to be some models that you're probably going to get annoyed with at a certain point where you're just like kind of done with this and you've got like 3 more to finish for that unit.
Yes, it is exactly that middle tier with your characters you have fun with. You lose 3 hours and you go, holy shit, I love this character. I love him so much. I custom painted that mustache. I spent like 30 minutes. I wasn't even paying attention to the passage of time. He is my favorite. And then you're on your 4th squad of assault intercessors and you've painted the exact same model so many times that you're like, I just don't care. These aren't hard, but I have to finish so many of them because I need to put them on the shelf so I'm done with them.
But at the same time, it's not one of those I can just dunk it in some paint and call it good. Like, there's still work that needs to be done.
And to be honest, at times, because it is such a, I'll say, regimented army, you end up with a everything is blue or everything is red.
Yes, I see what you're saying. We're like, you're going to want to find the steps to actually getting a model from nothing to painted and follow those steps.
Yes, and at times you'll become bored of, I have been painting highlights on blue for the last 4 days of hobbying. You don't want to be in that spot. It's an unfun spot. It's not painless like Orks where you're like, what's this knob going to have?
Oops. No, that's actually on purpose. Yeah, there's not quite so much of the just have fun with it kind of thing. There is a certain amount of expectations that they're similar.
And this goes for all successor chapters for people wondering why I'm not wasting my time talking about Space Wolves. They're all right here.
Some of them have some of their own specific things, but lumping them all together is fine.
We'll do a new army because it's very relevant.
Yeah?
So Votann is sitting with Space Marines in B tier. There's no getting around it. It's just the same thing.
I agree.
It's an army of tactical Marines.
Let's hope that in the future, when we get additional range to this, there's some more uniqueness.
To be fair, from a design standpoint, they are unique. I'm not going to pretend they look the exact same as Space Marines, but from a mechanical painting standpoint, it is flat panels on vehicles all over the place, cut up by lines of some sort, whether it be just, recess shading stuff, or if it's the, humpy blocks that make up the land fortress, right?
Yeah.
You can see how those are mechanically very similar. And then the dude is just dude in power armor. And there's no real frills to it. It's just, it's a dude in power armor. There's some fun models in each range, much less of them in Votann because there's just much less of them. There's some things you can show off with your characters, doing a fancy power weapon in either one, all that stuff. They're very similar on that spectrum of how difficult or fun or easy feeling they are to paint.
There are some interesting things that Votann have, but there are also interesting things that Space Marines have. So, okay, fair enough. But let's move on to something wildly different and kind of complicated with Aeldari.
Okay. Where do you want to put Aeldari?
Oh, it's so fucking difficult just because GW has screwed us.
Okay, first off, let's pause on Aeldari. Let's move over to the Darkkin.
Okay.
So Drukhari, I painted mine. They were a project for me where with most of my armies, it's me saying there's certain things I want to do when I hobby it. My Drukhari army was me learning contrast paints. It was me playing around for the first time with oil recess shades.
You learned a lot.
This was a big learning army for me. Basically, all those things that I saw in YouTube videos, I said, this is the army where I'm figuring it out.
And you've got a lot of examples of trying to figure it out.
Show my grotesques and how none of them match because it was me learning different. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
So, yes. That said, I would downright say Drukhari is painless.
Which is fascinating to me.
There is irony, the power from pain joke, but it's interesting because if you don't get hung up on, painting every pouch.
Okay.
Or trying to paint the grenade on this guy's waist. If you focus on the bigger parts, they're really pretty quick, especially with contrast paints. Or if you wanted to go a grimdark style with some streak and grime, play with some enamels, they're very fun. There's a lot of different ways to handle them.
Fair enough.
I would say they're downright fun to paint for the most part. There is miserable parts. I did not enjoy 2 nights of painting pants. There's a lot of painting leather pants.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a certain point where it's I agree with you and you're the one that has done it. So I'm going to default to your expectation and your answer. But
most of my pain with Drukhari is not the fault of Drukhari. As I stated when we were talking about them, my pain mostly came from I had a couple ideas when I first started out and I was trying different paint schemes. And I fell in love with by far the most difficult paint scheme to do. Do not paint your faction white if you value yourself as a person.
I feel like the only faction that actually makes up for that is Tau. It's still a fucking pain in the ass and there's better other options, but I think the white looks good.
There's several Chaos Knights with a good cream, although
cream's different.
Yeah, it's very different. Yeah, you're right.
I feel like Drukhari, if you're able to ignore the pouches and grenades and backpacks and all that stuff to a certain point.
And trust me, you will, because after 20 Cabalites, you just don't care. It will break your ability to care about random pouches that are on a model that is going to get picked up the second someone sneezes at it.
I think that I can support your decision on it being not too bad.
I will say it's flat out painless. All pain is voluntary, as it should be with Drukhari.
I mean, I feel like a lot of the pain they inflict is not, but...
It's voluntary for the Drukhari, though.
Right, that's true, that's true.
We don't care about the lesser species.
All right, so back to the non-fucked up elves.
There aren't any.
Obviously, there's a missing icon in the rest of what we have.
Yes, because we base it off 9th edition codexes. So, yeah, Eldar does include Harlequins.
Which, Harlequins are
not even at gunpoint. They are the only one that I will allow anyone to argue near Genestealers, but they're still not that bad.
Partially just because they don't have as many.
Yeah, they're just more elite.
At the same time, you can make Harlequins just a fucking nightmare with checkerboarding everything. But you don't have to. They can look really good without that.
I would say the rest of Aeldari is probably sitting with Drukhari in Painless. There's a lot of ways you can do them with contrast. There's a lot of ways you can do them if you airbrush them, if you just paint them normally. They're mostly elite.
There are some models that are we're not doing model by model.
Yeah, we can't get into like, oh, this Finecast model is a nightmare.
Yeah, well, every faction has those issues, so.
Okay, how about this? It should be painless, but 8 models are dragging it down to B tier.
8 models, yeah.
A suspicious number. It's like there's 8 data sheets that don't belong and are dragging it down towards not even a gunpoint.
All right. You know what? Fair enough.
If only they weren't in this and had their own proper faction that had more than 8 units.
Yeah. Moving on. Let's do another, chaos.
Sure, let's get some more chaos out of the way. CSM is sitting with the other two. It's what I said for World Eaters. We know what it was going to be.
Yeah, it's not unexpected at all. They're basically the same kind of thing.
There are fun things in these factions in the Chaos Trim Zone, by the way. It's just they come with the psychological damage of painting Chaos Trim. You have to know that.
Yeah, you can have fun doing it once or twice.
But you paint one Helldrake, and you're changed for life.
Wow. Okay, let's hop gears a little bit. Grey Knights. Let's hunt some chaos.
Okay, they're too good at hunting chaos. This one was judged by my wife, so this is, I guess, for newer audience members, because we may have a lot who don't know our older content. Eric did not paint his Grey Knights.
Fuck no, I didn't.
Eric paid my wife to paint them for him, which is why in the old lore, if you go very far back in time, you will find an audio episode in which we did our first talking about, getting into the hobby, and Eric was replaced by my wife.
I was very much not a part of that.
Eric would have had nothing of value to add to that conversation at the time.
I had built a few models.
Yeah, you built a couple models, under 10.
And then I said, fuck it, I'll pay somebody else.
Which is why Eric, unwise Eric, when we were starting this, was like, yeah, we'll just put all of the Space Marines in B tier. And I'm like, except Grey Knights. And he's like, why? There's Space Marines too. I'm like, no, because my wife has very strong opinions on Grey Knights. They are 90% tchotchkes.
Yeah.
Every surface of that Grey Knight is covered in gribbly bits. There is either an extra purity seal you forgot 2 steps ago and are raging about, or he has a book with a sword within a cream-colored logo for a other thing.
There's a lot of emblems and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yes, and they've got stuff everywhere. Every inch of a Grey Knight is covered in crap. There's no, nice, easy, paint it all blue, paint some shoulder pads, and call it good.
No, and every weapon's a force weapon.
Yeah, that one I cheated on with an airbrush. That's another mark against it, but I cheated on yours when I did them.
To be fair, it looks good.
I like yours. I'm proud of that quick hack I did.
The quick airbrush hack looks solid.
That was one evening, and I did your entire army.
Which is not that many units, but...
it's a fair amount.
It's a fair amount. Which, that is one of the things that the more elite armies, you don't have to paint as many.
Yes, there's a reason we haven't talked about Custodes yet.
But even then, Grey Knights is pretty brutal, and hopefully we'll have some point decreases or something like that in 10th, and it's not more elite than Custodes.
Okay, we're getting down to some really hard to talk about ones. I think a lot of these are interesting discussions, except for this one. IG is not even at gunpoint.
Oh god, no.
They're not as bad as Genestealer Cults. They are more mechanized by a long shot.
That's true. They are more mechanized.
If you are voluntarily putting together 120 Cadian soldiers, that's on you. You have brain damage.
I feel like most people that play that faction have that brain damage, so...
But that's on them. That's up there with my I did this to myself in Drukhari.
Okay. Yeah. I gotcha.
They're not as bad as Genestealers, but they are within the tier with them of, yes, 60 Cadians sucks to paint. Krieg are cooler. You should be painting Krieg anyway. But that harsh fact out of the way.
There's also the fact that, a lot of the models have faces.
Yes, unless you're Krieg, which again is the reason the Krieg is the correct option.
Oh, absolutely. Fuck being able to see faces. Helmet everything, man.
And there are ways to speed paint even IG and stuff. They exist. They are more rare. But again, this is about your general painting experience, not can you find a hack.
Yeah, we're trying to get the nice, not embarrassing, you didn't find the hack kind of thing.
Yeah, we're not counting the one recipe I've seen for speed painting Thousand Suns. That is the only way I've ever seen it done, but with 2 different color themes.
Which, I guess, do you want to talk about Thousand Suns?
I don't know where I want to put him. You think I want to put him in the Chaos Trim Zone but I almost think it goes beyond.
Really?
It's bad, man. It's soul-crushing. It's horrendous. What I did is considered pretty speed painty, because I showed you some of the hacks that you can do with how I did mine. If I had to do it legitsies, I don't know if I'd be done yet. And I finished these like almost a year ago now.
Yeah, I was like, that's been a while. You've recovered since then, but apparently not.
I'm 2 projects later for the most part, and I have unpainted rubrics that will probably never see paint. They just sit in a box, primed black, in exile because I own too many.
I was like, you don't need those. There's no list that you're planning on running them.
There are things that I never finished painting, and I will never finish painting.
Okay, I mean, I'm gonna give it to you because you're the one that painted it. I feel like it's Chaos Trim Zone because it's the trim that's the fucking problem.
They're riding the line, but I feel like they almost transcend how awful the name of this zone is. It doesn't tell you how bad it is, but I will put them here.
But it's an elite army, Brad. You don't have to do as many. Come on.
No, The complexity level of painting a single rubric is far beyond what any single model should have. I will put them as the lowest thing in the Chaos Trim Zone, bordering on not even at gunpoint. If you type into YouTube looking for a Thousand Suns speed painting guide, the results are few and far between, and a lot of them talk about paint a rubric marine in 25 minutes. That's a very long time to spend on one model for a troop that you're just going to pick up and throw in a bin as soon as it gets shot.
Speed painting Thousand Suns in 60 minutes.
Yeah. Did you Google it?
I did.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, then.
When I was looking it up, I am not joking. There are discussions in Thousand Sun Discord server and everything else constantly from new people asking like, hey, what's the hack to make this not a miserable slog?
How do I stop trying to kill myself on this?
And the answer is often, you're gonna not want to play this army.
Yeah, just accept that you should pick up another army as the palette cleanser in between finishing.
My Chaos Knights were my palette cleanser. I had fun doing the airbrushing on those, but then I got mad when they were like 80% done about stuff that happened the other week and they all went in a box of anger. We're not talking about balance today right now.
Yeah, right. Definitely not at all. Okay, what do we got left? You want to do...
AdMech have to go in the not even at gunpoint zone. Our AdMech player won't let me put them anywhere else.
They do deserve that.
They're bad. It's not Genestealer's bad, but they're right there. I've looked at him. He has done a good job on those models. He made it look easier than it was, but they're right down there.
The difficult part is the AdMech player in our group is the best painter. So he makes things look easy that very much are not.
And he Tony Starks it. The man painted his AdMech with craft paints before even picking up hobby paints at all. So like when he did those, he's doing them in a cave with rocks. And I'm not saying craft paints are terrible, but they are a slight quality decrease over even bad paints in mini paints.
You have to spend the time and effort to use them correctly.
Yes. And he did it before he even learned how to use a normal palette. He's never touched a wet palette for the most part. He had a lot working against him. And he made him look easy and great. I sat with him one evening and he painted up Call in a single evening and he's totally fine looking. He hates him, but we all think it looks great.
It's very much one of those, the army is difficult and there's a lot of bits, there's a lot of filigree, there's a lot of spindly, annoying things that you're likely to break while painting.
Oh yeah, if you add in hobby stuff, I'd argue a couple things get even lower than where they're currently at.
The reason I bring it up specifically for AdMech is because like
there's permanent damage on several of his models caused by not him.
Right.
I'm not saying I did it. I'm saying he wasn't in the room to prove I did it.
Right.
And the time he was, I can still gaslight with the best of them.
Wow.
Why the servo skulls that are like above their heads, so when you reach down with your giant meat hook hand, you break like 5 objects on the way down to the model to pick it up?
Yeah.
They're like invisible until you hit them, and then you're like, what was that? Oh, this model is in 13 pieces.
Yeah. Oh, and some of them are like you hit it and you don't even notice it until there's like bits left on the ground as you pick the model up and you're like, huh, that's interesting terrain. Wait, that's not right. But yeah, AdMech is gonna be brutal. What do we have left here?
Let's do sisters, and we'll end on a lot of high notes.
Okay.
I think sisters have to live here in the Chaos Trim Zone.
Absolutely.
I don't think they ascend up to B tier.
No.
They basically have to end up here somewhere.
Airbrush can help, but it's not fixing anything. There's a decent amount of units that you have to have, and they are intricate. It's not just a dunk 'em.
Yeah, you have a lot more sisters than you have Space Marines, and they've got more shit on them.
Yep. There's a decent amount of faces.
There's a lot of exposed faces, too, unless you try to helmet everybody, yeah.
Actually, you can helmet the vast majority, but...
You can be our Psychopath Sisters player who put a helmet on Saint Celestine.
Which I support. I absolutely support it.
I don't. That may have been a step too far, but alright. You do you, it's your army.
Fuck the faces, man.
I'm a fan of helmets in war zones, but when you're a literal chaos demon, well, order demon, whatever, you can get away with the exposed head. You're already not real.
That's fair. So yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a difficult to paint army. It's not as bad as the not even at gunpoint ones.
It's not down that far. It has the exact same types of issues that Chaos Trim does. It could almost slide its way to B tier if it wasn't for the fact that you run a lot more sisters than you do Space Marines.
And I think that's exactly why the trim and like the little bits and stuff are gonna grate on your nerves just that much extra due to the amount of times you have to repeat the process over and over again.
It is worth updating this because now that we've got Grey Knights and Sisters here, we have the anti-Chaos Trim Zone.
That's true. Hey, look at that. I like that.
All right, let's end on what I consider to be a lot of great high notes here. First up, let's talk Custodes.
Well, we're not just going to immediately jump to Necrons. I saw the mouse hover on that one.
We'll talk about them in a minute.
Okay.
Custodes can be our first paintbrush liquor approved tier. Doesn't matter how much lead paint you've consumed over your life. Custodes win out from, yeah, they're boring like Space Marines, but you have to paint like 10 of them to get 2,000 points.
There is a decent amount of work.
On a model per model basis, yes. They are more complicated than a Space Marine, absolutely.
But you're basically just painting a bunch of characters.
Yes, that is a perfect way to say it. In an extreme case, you will play 35, 40 models. On a more average case, you will play 20 to 30 models at 2,000 points. If you're playing like super Terminator heavy, or you for some reason have a Telemon, you could have a lot less.
And the Anathema models aren't the most difficult.
They're not as complicated as actual like Sisters of Battle. Sisters of Silence are not as bad to paint.
Yeah, they're going to be more difficult than just general whatever, but like they're not that much difficult.
And you're painting like 5 of them, maybe 15, depending on how much you want to use like a squad of 10 of them with 5 on a back point somewhere.
So just by the sheer numbers, Custodes goes in paintbrush liquor approved. And I mean, at the same time, everybody loves gold.
All right, we'll save Necrons for last. We all know where it's going.
Yeah.
Let's talk NIDS. I think NIDS is straight up painless, which sounds crazy.
I actually agree with you. It's probably lower, probably in like B.
If you had a bad experience, you may say B tier. However, the models, much like Orks, are incredibly fun.
Yeah.
You could argue to some extent they are an airbrush check. I'd give that one too, depending on how you think of it. Because yes, the army can definitely be a horde army. Absolutely a valid thing that I'm sure many people have. Their hordes are often 3 colors.
Yeah.
It's not like painting a neophyte hybrid. When you put one of those next to like a Termagant is color for body, color for carapace, and then the eye color / gun color.
Maybe some gun specialty stuff going on there.
And then you'll do some highlight colors or whatever, right? But there's 3 core colors there. If you look at a neophyte, there's like 35 different colors on that model in a standard paint job.
Yeah. One of the things about the horde aspect in Tyranids is they're not supposed to look unique.
Yes, they are the mass.
The swarm.
The wave of bodies. Honestly, design-wise, they are a horde done right.
Oh, absolutely.
You sometimes will run 60 plus models of the same type. But when you do that, the models are simplistic. They look gorgeous, but they're simplistic.
And they kind of like disappear into each other.
Yes. Whereas when you get into IG, admin, Mech, Genestealers, those do not pass that test.
On the other side, there's the big fancy models of Tyranids, and those are just fun.
Those are up there with Knights, the best parts of Orks.
Yeah, they give you the real hobby, do what you want to do, have fun with it kind of thing.
Yeah, they're your dopamine drip between painting another 20 Termagants.
Yeah.
I could see placing Tyranids lower, but I'm going to put them into Painless because I think they do all the things right that the other hordes do wrong, and they have a lot of fun toys for people who want to go the more heavy hitter route.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Demons. I have been trying to figure out how I feel about them. I have been painting Demons for the last month. I've been sharing some pictures even on Twitter and stuff, which I don't normally do.
Demons have a similar fucking issue that Craft World Aeldari have.
What issue is that?
It's not just one fucking faction.
That's not a negative in this case. You're annoyed from a codex standpoint with rules, and I agree with that. I hate demons being demons. But from a painting standpoint, it being the 4 armies is in its favor. Because when you're bored of painting one type, you can swap.
I see what you're saying, but that only really works if you don't hate the other side.
Correct. I've been painting pure Tzeentch demons this whole time.
Yeah.
I'm painting some new soul grinders. I'm finishing up a bunch of half-done stuff to finally get up to speed.
And I think the section of the army that you enjoy, or the 2 sections of the army that you enjoy, are going to be rather nice and enjoyable, but few people are going to enjoy doing the whole 4 factions.
Yeah, but you don't have to do that. There are pure Khorne enjoyers who are perfectly happy for the last 3 editions now.
What about the others?
You can play pure Khorne and pure Slaanesh and be happy for the majority of the time you've played since the beginning of 8th edition. You're never happy if you're playing Nurgle. It just hasn't ever been good.
Yeah, that's true.
Tzeentch is the one that floats around, but to defend that, I have been painting nothing but Tzeentch. I have not felt a drop of boredom. Tzeentch has so much variety within Tzeentch. I have used every color known to man to paint these things. I have single models where I went across the rainbow spectrum all over the model and made it come together and work.
That is true. Chaos demons do have the reality doesn't matter as much.
Yes, if you're in any part of Demons, you can make a pretty good argument for at least several different color choices over the course of your army.
Which is nice.
I have seen all sorts of styles. Some people go for like the ultra grimdark stuff. Some people go like mine is, where you're going for incredibly vivid coloration.
Yeah.
My Khorne is actually probably not going to go that way. I have not painted my Khorne demons yet, but I've been kind of wanting them to be like a polar opposite to my hyper colorful Tzeentch.
I'm really hoping that you end up going like cell shaded for Slaanesh.
No, not at all. I'm at a point where I kind of hope that I put off my Slaanesh demons long enough that Demons is split in 3 years. And I won't have to paint them. I'll just sell them and go buy more of the stuff I like instead.
Yeah.
The only thing I like in Slaanesh is my greater demons, and I will always keep those because that's like the only fun way to play all the Chaos Gods.
Well, and I mean, there is a certain aspect of like, even if you don't really like that part of it, you can still enjoy this is the centerpiece kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm fine with keeping them as an art piece.
But overall, I agree with the variety is actually a boon for painting, even though I still fucking hate it.
Look, an airbrush is a really nice bonus. I have done amazing airbrush work on my Tzeentch demons. It's not needed though because contrast paints are also a really fun way to paint demons. They're like known for being so fun to contrast paint. They have big organic bodies. You can do wet blending with 2 different contrast paints to get sweet fades over there's so many things you can do with demons. So it's definitely above there. I don't even think it's B tier. I think it's flat out painless. And I was debating if it was B tier or painless, and I think it's flat out painless. Because the only time it'll be painful is if you're painting a part of the army you don't like. At which point, stop and examine why the fuck you're wasting your time painting a part of an army you don't like.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, painless with a lesson. I like that. Let's finish off with Necrons.
Okay, Necrons is just paintbrush liquor approved. We're done. It is the easiest army to paint.
Figure out how to use dry brushing. Easy GG.
Do not paint your Necrons with my scheme. Remember KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Do not overcomplicate your Necrons. You are losing one of the key aspects that makes them so fun, that you don't have to give a shit and you can get them painted before someone else is done with their base coats.
Yeah, and it does generally work for Necrons, like they're supposed to be the faceless robots.
And there's tons of variety you can get and still get them done that fast. They're so simple to make look good compared to everybody else. There are so many correct answers. There are wrong answers where you overcomplicate them. Do not do my paint scheme. I am angry that I did it many years ago and I really regret my choices.
I mean, it sounds to me like you should strip them all and redo it.
I wouldn't strip them. They're not thickly painted like when you buy like an eBay rescue. I would just prime over them.
Oh, wow.
I've had the thought before, but I won't do it. It's like literally 8,000 points.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like your next project is one of those in our not even at gunpoint tier. So we'll see. We'll see how you do with the, maybe I'll just redo the paintbrush liquor approved army.
No.
We'll see.
If your army is done, you need to have a very serious debate about why you are touching it again. If you got it past your good enough point, it needs to be you seeking out the want to go further. Don't tax yourself if you've got it there.
Yeah. I mean, unless you just want to restart the hobby, I guess.
But yeah, Necrons, very fun to paint. Instant winner.
Yeah. Get a nice dry brush.
You will unfortunately pay for this by having every one of your fucking immortals, every one of your wraiths, every one of your Lich Guard constantly lose their goddamn limbs.
That's what they're supposed to do, right?
We were playing that first game of 10th we played, remember that first fucking weekend? Yeah. And the first Lich Guard I dropped shattered his fucking arms off. I despise Necrons and Admech's stupid little tiny limbs, and now I'm going to be doing Genestealer Cults, so you won't hear me stop.
Like I said, you're a fucking masochist, but it's okay.
Thank God for Chaos Knights, Demons, and Thousand Suns, because if it wasn't for them, I would have only spindly armies that shatter. I'll say, my Drukhari don't break as much as my other armies that are spindly.
Shockingly, it's true.
My Necrons shatter way more often than my Drukhari do. They're built different.
To be fair, a lot of the Drukhari that you've played have been boats.
True, they stay off the table more. And as another thing, Drukhari tend to have small weapons, and part of the problem with Necrons and Admech is you'll have a spindly little tendril, at the end of which is a giant hunk of plastic, which is what happened with that Lich Guard. His arms broke off because he had a sword and shield. And those are more heavy than the Lich Guard.
Yeah, and then you like try and like put them all together so that they're like, you know, a coherent unit. And they're like, nah, I've got big spindly bits that are in the way of other big spindly bits. And it's like, oh, fucking hell, man.
Yeah, a Lich Guard gauze rifle hooking around another one, guaranteed you end up with two Necrons with no arms.
Yeah, haven't seen that before.
There's a lot of super glue on my Necrons at this point.
Yeah, I haven't had too much of a problem with that other than one fucking sword, which has just disappeared now, so I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Don't buy Finecast kits. Please make us a new Kaldor Drago GW.
Fucking annoying bastard. He looks so cool, and it could be so cool, and now he just doesn't have a sword.
I love that the sword is just gone now, by the way.
Oh, it's just gone.
It used to be a joke that Kaldor Drago's sword constantly broke off.
Well, you just put it on the base.
But then we were moving the models into the new shelving units, and I picked up Drago from the old shelf, and I cleaned off the rest of the shelf looking for the sword. It is nowhere. It's on no one's base. It's not jammed in someone's armpit. It is gonzo.
Yeah. That's great. I love it.
So Kaldor Drago has an invisible sword until they make a proper model for him, and we can throw this one in the trash.
He's just using his super psychic powers. Just imagine there's a sword there.
All right, on that note, we're done with this topic. Feel free to give us any thoughts you have. Feel free to comment on YouTube and tell us how wrong we are and that your army is secretly the hardest thing ever. And coincidentally, you play Necrons. And coincidentally, your paint is leaded.
I am super, super looking forward to the Necron players that are like, no way, this is so difficult.
I have to paint 3 whole paints. Do you know how hard it is to move a dry brush back and forth? I have a hard time finding 3 colors on them.
It's silver, lighter silver, and
Does the black primer that's in the shadows count? Is that one of the 3? Am I allowed to use that?
Oh, the Poor Hammer Podcast at gmail.com.
Send all your hate mail to Justin Parnell at at StarCityGames.com. Let's get out of here for the week.
Sounds good.